The air inside the quiet bedroom in San Diego smelled faint of lavender, but 7-year-old Leo couldn't sleep. Outside his window, the palm trees swayed gently in the Southern California breeze, completely detached from the violent world playing out on the muted television screen downstairs. On the wall above his bed hung a framed photo of his father, Lieutenant Commander David Miller, dressed in his crisp navy whites, smiling broadly as he held Leo on his shoulders. David was a tactical officer aboard the USS Mason, a guided missile destroyer currently deployed in the Persian Gulf. Before he left, he had handed Leo a small, polished brass compass. "Whenever you feel lost, Leo," his dad had told him, "just look at this. It always points home, and so will I." In the living room downstairs, the blue light of the TV flickered against the dark walls. On screen, dramatic red banners flashed across the broadcast, massive missile battles in the Persian Gulf. Sirens wailed through news footage from Kuwait and Bahrain as air defense batteries intercepted incoming salvos of Iranian-supplied ballistic missiles and swarms of loitering drones. Leo crept down the carpeted stairs, clutching the heavy brass compass tight in his small fist. He peeked through the railing and saw his mother, Sarah, sitting on the edge of the couch. Her hands were pressed tightly over her mouth, her shoulders shaking in silent, agonizing sobs as she stared at the breaking news. Leo tiptoed down the last few steps, the cool wooden floor chilling his bare feet. He didn't say a word as he sat down beside his mother, wrapping his small arms around her waist and leaning his head against her shoulder. Sarah flinched in surprise, but quickly pulled him close, kissing the top of his head as tears streamed down her cheeks. On the screen, a reporter standing on a rooftop in Manama spoke frantically over the distant wail of air defense sirens. Behind him, bright arcs of fire cut through the black sky, American Patriot batteries and naval interceptors working overtime to swat down incoming Iranian ballistic missiles. The anchor cut to live footage from the central Persian Gulf. Blinding flashes lit up the horizon as guided missile destroyers like his father's fired salvo after salvo of Standard missiles into the night. "Mom," Leo whispered, his voice small but steady as he rubbed the brass compass between his palms. "Is Dad fighting those fireballs?" Sarah swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "Your dad is doing his job, sweetie. He's making sure everyone stays safe." Thousands of miles away, inside the darkened, hum-filled Combat Information Center of the USS Mason, Lieutenant Commander David Miller didn't hear the ocean. He heard the chaotic, rhythmic rhythm of combat systems. Blue light from radar consoles illuminated his exhausted face as the ship's Aegis system tracked dozens of fast-moving red threats closing in from the Iranian coastline. Target inbound, bearing 040, high altitude, high speed, a tactical operator yelled above the alarm chimes. Ship's defense green, ready to engage. David's hand hovered over the launch authorization console. His mind raced back to San Diego, to the small compass resting in his son's hands, before his military training took over completely. "Engage threat. Shoot, look, shoot," he commanded calmly, sending another wave of defensive missiles screaming off the deck to protect both his crew and the innocent lives under the falling iron skies. Inside the steel belly of the USS Mason, the sound of the vertical launch system firing was like thunder cracking directly overhead. Every time a SM-2 missile blasted out of its silo, the entire deck vibrated through the soles of David's boots. "Inbound threat destroyed, 6 miles out," the tracking coordinator called out, his voice tight. "Second salvo incoming from the northern sector. Multiple contacts, looks like a mixed strike, drones, and anti-ship cruise missiles." David wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. His eyes flicked to a small photo taped to the corner of his radar monitor. Leo, 5 years old, wearing an oversized captain's hat. "Hold the line," David thought. "Just keep everyone safe and get back to them." Radar lock confirmed. Authorize CIWS to auto-engage close threats. Fire at will on outer targets. Back in San Diego, the clock on the wall chimed 3 a.m. Leo refused to go back to bed. He sat crisscrossed on the living room rug, holding the brass compass in one hand and his mother's cold fingers in the other. On the screen, a news banner flashed. U.S. destroyer intercepts multiple threats over Persian Gulf. No casualties reported. Sarah let out a shaky, desperate breath, sinking deeper into the sofa as if her strength had suddenly vanished. She pulled Leo onto her lap, wrapping her arms around him like armor. "Look, Mom," Leo said softly, pointing down at the glowing needle of the compass in his hand. It vibrated slightly as he moved, but held its ground, pointing north. "The needle isn't spinning anymore. That means Dad's okay. He knows where home is." Thousands of miles away, as the final enemy drone burst into a shower of sparks over the dark waters of the Gulf, David stepped out onto the ship's bridge wing. The sea wind hit his face, carrying the bitter smell of burnt rocket fuel, but the sky above was clear. He reached into his tactical vest, his fingers brushing against a duplicate brass compass he kept in his pocket, and stared toward the eastern horizon, waiting for the sun to rise. The dawn broke over the Persian Gulf in a haze of amber and smoke. On the bridge wing of the USS Mason, the cool ocean breeze brought little relief to David as he watched the distant horizon. The radar screens inside were finally clear, but everyone on board knew this brief lull was just the calm before a much bigger storm. Intelligence reports coming through the encrypted channels warned of a massive, coordinated retaliatory strike being prepped along the coastline. Back in San Diego, the morning sun poured into the living room, but the atmosphere remained heavy. Leo sat on the floor, lining up his toy ships on the rug while his mother watched the news on mute. The breaking banner warned of escalating tensions and imminent missile threats targeting both naval forces and military bases across Kuwait and Bahrain. "Mom," Leo asked, looking up from his toys, "if Dad's ship shoots down all the missiles, who shoots down the ones aimed at the bases?" Sarah paused, holding 2 coffee mugs, unable to give a comforting answer. Before she could speak, her phone vibrated violently against the kitchen counter. It wasn't a call or a text, but an emergency defense notification sent to military families, advisory warning of heightened threat levels in the deployment zone. At that exact moment, thousands of miles away, the alarms inside the USS Mason shrieked again, louder and more urgent than before. Red warning lights bathed the Combat Information Center in a blood-colored glow. "Captain." Multiple ballistic signatures launched simultaneously from 3 different inland sites. The tactical officer yelled. "They aren't just targeting us. They're heading for the mainland facilities in Kuwait." David's eyes locked onto the tactical display. The air defense umbrella was about to be tested past its absolute limit, and his ship stood directly in the line of fire. The digital clock in the Mason's combat center blinked rapidly as the Aegis system struggled to process the overwhelming volume of incoming targets. Dozens of red icons filled the screen, fanning out like a deadly swarm. Some were low-flying cruise missiles skimming the water toward the fleet, while others were heavy ballistic missiles arcing high into the atmosphere, aimed directly at the naval bases in Bahrain and Kuwait where thousands of personnel were taking cover in bunkers. "We can't intercept them all on our own," the air defense coordinator shouted, his voice strained under the immense pressure. "Radar lock lost on contact 3. It's using active jamming." David didn't hesitate. He leaned over the console, his hands flying across the tactical interface to manually override the radar tracking filters. "Slave the target data to the guided missile cruiser on our starboard flank. Share the tracking grid now," he ordered, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "We cover the low-altitude threats to protect the strike group. Let the Patriot batteries ashore take the high-altitude ballistics." Outside, the night sky erupted into absolute chaos. The USS Mason transformed into a roaring dragon of steel and fire, launching its remaining interceptors 2 at a time while its close-in weapon systems whined, firing thousands of rounds per minute to shred an incoming drone just hundreds of yards from the hull. The shockwave rattled the entire vessel, throwing crew members against the bulkheads, but the ship held its line. Back in San Diego, the television screen suddenly went dark, a temporary signal loss from the front lines that sent a wave of icy terror straight through Sarah's heart. She covered her face, unable to breathe. Leo stood up from the rug, walked over to his mother, and gently placed his small hand over her trembling fingers. In his other hand, he held the brass compass tightly against his chest. "Mom, look at me," Leo whispered, his young eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering belief that defied the horror unfolding half a world away. "The compass isn't broken. Dad is fighting right now, but he's coming back," he promised. The blinding flashes across the horizon slowly faded, leaving behind only thin trails of white smoke hanging in the morning air over the Persian Gulf. One by one, the red threat icons disappeared from the tactical displays inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Mason. The massive salvo had been repelled, every incoming missile intercepted or forced off course, and the military facilities ashore remained intact. David leaned against the command console, letting out a long, ragged breath as the crew cheered softly around him. He stepped out onto the quiet deck, pulled the brass compass from his tactical vest, and held it up against the rising sun, watching the needle settle firmly to the north. Thousands of miles away, the television signal in the San Diego living room suddenly flickered back to life. The news anchor's voice cut through the silence, announcing that the Naval Strike Group had successfully neutralized the threat with no U.S. ships damaged and no casualties reported. Sarah fell to her knees with tears of pure relief, pulling Leo into a tight hug. As the young boy squeezed his mother back, he looked down at the brass compass resting safely in his small palm, knowing that across the vast ocean, his father was already on his way home. This story is a powerful reminder that behind every headline, missile defense system, and military action, there are real human lives hanging in the balance, fathers fighting to return home, and families waiting bravely in the quiet hours of the night. True strength lies not just in the armor of warships, but in the unwavering love, hope, and promises that bind us together across thousands of miles. If this story touched your heart and kept you on the edge of your seat, please consider supporting the channel by subscribing so you never miss our next deep and emotional story. Hitting the like button because your support means the absolute world to me and truly motivates me as a creator to bring you even better content. And ringing the notification bell so you will always be the first to know when a new story drops and won't lose our channel in your feed. Thank you so much for being here and listening, as there are many more powerful stories coming your way.